Last weekend, the 95th Oscars took place, and for the most part, I think they got a lot of the winners right. Whether that's Ke Huy Quan for Best Supporting Actor, Sarah Polley for Best Adapted Screenplay, or even Brendan Fraser for Best Actor. I think they got a lot of the main categories just right. Okay, maybe not Jamie Lee Curtis for Best Supporting Actress, but anyway, we move. Now, while I was watching this year's ceremony, it had me thinking about previous Oscars and what won specific awards, specifically the big one of Best Picture. And the reason it had me thinking is because the Oscars is arguably the biggest award show during the awards season. So whatever is deemed as Best Picture usually is the case for most people that aren't as into film as, say, you or me. 9 out of 10 times, if a film wins Best Picture at the Oscars, the general public is going to look at that and go, okay, I'll take your word for it. That must be the best film of that year. Now, as a concept, this makes sense, but for people that are into film like myself, I'm obviously aware that a lot of the time the Oscars can be drastically wrong. They can pick a film for Best Picture and it isn't necessarily representative of what actually was some of the best films of that year. Occasionally though they do get it right, like in 2020 when they awarded the Best Picture Oscar to Bong Joon-ho's Parasite, which was incredibly well deserved, or even in 2017 when you had films nominated like Manchester by the Sea, La La Land and Arrival, and they ended up giving it to Moonlight, which arguably was the best film of that year. However, what some people aren't necessarily aware of, specifically in the general public, is that sometimes being awarded Best Picture isn't necessarily the best thing for that film or the people that made it. Which is the point I wanted to look at in today's video. Films that have won Best Picture over the years that unfortunately have kind of fallen to what I am calling the Best Picture curse. Now, whenever I say a film has been hit by the Best Picture curse, I mean it has fallen into one of two categories. It either won Best Picture and has just been forgotten about over time, or it won Best Picture and all of a sudden the reception towards that film has deteriorated over time for some bizarre reason. And we're going to look at both of those categories in a bit more depth, but the first one I wanted to look at was films that have won Best Picture that have for some reason been forgotten about over the years. Now, like I said before, sometimes a film can be awarded Best Picture and it not necessarily be representative of what actually was the best film of that year. And for a film to fall into that category and actually win Best Picture, I can kind of understand why a film in that category would be forgotten about over time. For example, a really good instance of this is the film Tom Jones. Yeah, and I'm not talking about the Welsh singer. A film called Tom Jones won Best Picture in 1964, and this is the first time I'm hearing about it. And I wouldn't usually make a big deal about a film that's this old winning Best Picture, but when you consider what won it the year before and the year after, that being Lawrence of Arabia and My Fair Lady, I've actually heard of those films. They're classics. Everyone knows them. Why is Tom Jones here amongst this list of absolute iconic classic films? However, I think to get this point across a little bit better, let's look at some slightly more recent examples. And the two films that I've chosen to fit this category are Argo, the winner of Best Picture in 2013, and The Artist, the winner of Best Picture in 2012. Now, I know there are some people out there that do vaguely remember The Artist winning Best Picture in 2012. But that being said, the ratio of people remembering that the film exists compared to people that have actually heard of it and let alone have actually seen it is quite a drastic shift. In 2012, The Artist was up against films like Hugo, The Tree of Life, Moneyball, and Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close for some reason, and it ended up winning. And as someone who has actually seen The Artist, I can actually kind of get by this choice. I think it's an absolutely brilliant film, and in terms of paying homage to the silent era of film, I think it does its job so perfectly well and actually puts a spin on the concept of paying homage to that era in quite an interesting way that I don't think enough people give it credit for. However, I think the reason this film got forgotten so quickly over time is because it is very pandering to Hollywood. I mean, hell, it's a film that is silent, it is paying homage to a specific era that was arguably Hollywood's golden age, so it's going to be right up Hollywood's street, so it makes sense that it won Best Picture. But if you've actually seen the film, you will know that it is actually also a really good film on its own merits. However, what I think is an even better example is Argo, which won Best Picture in 2013. Now, if you've seen Argo, you will know that it is a really good thriller. However, for some reason, people have just forgotten about it over time, and I don't understand it. But the reason I wanted to focus on Argo a little bit more than The Artist is because you can kind of logically understand why it's kind of been forgotten over the years. Even though it is a really good film, The Artist makes a bit more sense than Argo. However, with Argo, I don't understand why it's been forgotten. It is a really well-made film with great performances, great story, impeccable direction, and it's just a really well-made film. So why it's been forgotten about over the years kind of baffles me a little bit. And I don't think Argo is an example of a film that was gradually forgotten over many years. I would speak to people about the Oscars a couple of years after it won, and a lot of people kind of forgot it actually won, and you'd have to remind them that, oh yeah, that Ben Affleck film set in the 70s, do you remember that? And then they would occasionally go, oh yeah, no, I do kind of remember that film. But you'd have to really jog their memory to remember that it actually won Best Picture. Now let's swiftly move on to the other category that I want to focus on. A film that was highly praised before getting nominated for Best Picture. It then wins Best Picture, and then suddenly everyone hates it. Now, probably the best, most recent example of this happening is Green Book in 2019. Before the film came out, I personally saw nothing but rave positive reviews for the film. However, as soon as it won Best Picture, everyone suddenly hated it. And I personally don't understand this mentality. It's happened a couple of times throughout the years with films that have won Best Picture, and I just don't get it. If a film was universally praised to begin with, and all of a sudden it winning an award suddenly discredits it from all that praise that it was building up over the last year, that doesn't make any sense to me. And there's a couple of films throughout the years that have fallen into this category, some more deserving than others. For instance, one of the most hated Best Picture winners of all time is Crash, which won in 2006. Now, I haven't seen Crash, so I can't comment on the quality of the film. But when it's up against Brokeback Mountain, and pretty much everyone thought Brokeback Mountain was going to be a guaranteed win, and then Crash comes out of nowhere and wins the award instead, yeah, I can kind of understand the hate and why it has been disliked for so many years. But then you have something like the 2011 Oscars, which the winner was The King's Speech. Now, at the time, I was in secondary school, I liked The King's Speech, and I thought it was a really good choice. However, in hindsight, and with having seen more films, I know that it might not have been the best choice considering the amount of films that were nominated that are now modern classics. For example, here is the full list of films that were nominated for Best Picture at the 2011 Oscars, but lost to The King's Speech. Black Swan, The Fighter, Inception, The Kids Are All Right, 127 Hours, The Social Network, Toy Story 3, True Grit, and Winter's Bone. Now, from reading that list alone, you can kind of see where I'm coming from. Films like Black Swan, Inception, The Social Network, and Toy Story 3 are kind of regarded as modern classics by a lot of people, and they lost to The King's Speech. So, in that sense, I can again also understand why people kind of dislike that choice. However, as someone who does actually really like The King's Speech, I can understand why it was nominated and why it eventually won. Do I think it should have won? No, I personally would have given it to The Social Network. But again, it's another example of a film that was highly praised before the Oscars happened, and then as soon as it won Best Picture, everyone kind of shat on it. And with a film especially like The King's Speech, that kind of frustrates me, because if you look at it as its own film, it is actually really well made, and the performances are worthy of their praise. However, the reason I bring up this specific part of the discussion around the Best Picture curse is because I feel like I'm seeing it again. For those of you that have been sleeping under a rock for a week, the winner of Best Picture this year was Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I am so on board with that choice. It was my favourite film of last year. It literally has a bit of everything in the film. It's a no-brainer. It makes sense. And as someone who was following the hype of the film pretty much all of last year up until when I saw it eventually in about, I think, May or June time, I, again, completely understand why they chose this film. And as a fan of the film, it's actually quite insane to see this small independent film debut at South by Southwest and all the small festivals last year, get a lot of praise during its festival run, and then as it started to seep into cinemas over the course of last year, it just gained more and more praise and more traction, and it pretty much just consistently maintained that sense of positivity, praise and hype as it went into award season. Basically, the praise just kept coming more and more until it got to the Oscars and it won Best Picture, and that praise was at an all-time high. And again, considering it's my favourite film of last year, I am so happy that it, one, maintained that level of praise from start to finish, and also ended up winning the big one, because I am so happy to just see a small film like that win such a prestigious prize. Similar to last year's Best Picture winner, Coda. Even though I don't love that film as much as Everything Everywhere All at Once, it was still really refreshing to see this small little independent film come out of nowhere and win the big award. That being said, and I know this is early days, but I've already started to see memes pop up online of people discrediting Everything Everywhere All at Once and immediately crapping on it because it's won Best Picture. Now hopefully this is just a small fad that blows over really quickly. However, there is a small part of me that worries that this mentality is going to keep building traction and that Everything Everywhere All at Once is going to become the new Green Book. And I really don't want that to be the case. Now personally, I have no answer as to why these films are forgotten or suddenly despised once winning the Best Picture Oscar. I have no idea how it happens or why it happens, and it just baffles me. So I would love to see in the comments what you guys think about it, because I would love to open up a discussion about what you think about these films, the ones that have been forgotten to time, or the ones that used to be loved but all of a sudden are now just disliked beyond all regard. Anyway guys, that's all I've got for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to leave a comment down below and let me know what you think about this whole thing that goes on with Best Picture winners. If you enjoyed the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.